Have you ever heard of an abandoned orphanage that was supposedly haunted by the very children it once housed? It's a creepy story told by locals in some places around the world. And today, we're going to tell you one such story about an abandoned orphanage in a forgotten countryside. It has been more than 100 years since the last child was taken from this place. The playground is overgrown and the windows are shattered, but its weathered stone walls still stand strong. This orphanage has become nothing more than a ruin in a forgotten countryside, and everyone who lives nearby knows better than to go there alone at night. After all, it is just a building full of bad memories. However, on one night, a young historian named Clara decided to enter this ruined building to see if she could find out what happened here. As she searched through the rooms, she began to hear children laughing in the walls, even though the building was completely empty. So, what was really going on here? Let's find out. The old woman looked at Clara with a mixture of fear and sadness in her eyes. She took a deep breath before finally speaking. "I'm sorry, but I can't let you stay here. This place is cursed, and it's best if you don't stick around." Clara replied, "But I'm not afraid. Please just tell me what happened here, and then I promise I'll leave." The old woman hesitated for a moment, but then began to speak in a low voice. "A long time ago, this was an orphanage, but it wasn't just any orphanage. It was a special place where children with special abilities were brought to be raised. Most of them were abandoned by their parents because they were too scared or ashamed to have them around. But the orphanage wasn't able to keep them safe either. One night, while most of the children were sleeping, a group of masked men broke into the building and took them away. We don't know what happened to them, but some say they were sold to traveling circuses and others say they were used for dark experiments. All we know is that none of them ever came back, and those who did try to return were never the same again. They spoke of strange lights and sounds, and some even claimed to have seen creatures like dogs with human faces. That's why they left and never came back. None of us have ever dared to ask what kind of experiments they were talking about, but I think you should be careful when you're dealing with people who are willing to do something like that. You never really know what they're capable of. Since then, the orphanage has stood abandoned, and people have started to believe that it's haunted by the children who never made it out alive. Some say you can still hear their laughter echoing through the halls at night, and others claim to have seen their ghosts playing on the swings in the playground. Personally, I don't like to think about it too much. It's a painful reminder of what we lost, and I just try to forget it ever happened. But I guess some things are just too painful to forget, and the pain just gets passed down from one generation to the next." The old woman fell silent, and Clara could see that she was struggling to hold back her tears. It was clear that whatever had happened at the orphanage had deeply affected her, and she knew that Clara was about to learn the truth about the mysterious orphanage. As she continued exploring the building, she found a hidden room that had been sealed off for years. Inside, she discovered a dusty trunk filled with old documents and photographs. As she looked through them, she realized that the orphanage had been the site of a horrific experiment conducted by a secret society known as the Order of the Crimson Moon. According to their records, the Order had kidnapped children with special abilities and brought them to the orphanage where they would use them for their rituals. The goal was to create an army of superpowered assassins who would do their bidding. But the experiments were dangerous, and many of the children were killed or driven insane. Those who survived were taken away in the middle of the night, and their existence was erased from the records. Clara was horrified to learn the truth about the orphanage, but she was determined to find out what had happened to the children. She searched through the old documents and found a map that led her to a secret tunnel beneath the building. According to the map, the tunnel led to an abandoned mine where the Order had hidden some of the children. With a flashlight in hand, Clara crawled through the dark and narrow tunnel. It was musty, and the air was thick with the smell of decay. But she pressed on, hoping to find some answers. Finally, she reached the end of the tunnel and emerged into a large cavern. In the center of the cavern, Clara found a wooden box filled with bones. As she carefully examined the bones, she realized that they belonged to a young child. But as she continued to search, she found more boxes filled with bones of other children. It was clear that these were the remains of the children who had been experimented on by the Order. Overcome with emotion, Clara vowed to give the children a proper burial. She gathered their bones and took them back to the surface, where she buried them in a nearby forest. As she stood at the gravesite, she felt a sense of peace knowing that the children were finally laid to rest. But as the sun began to set, Clara felt a sudden chill down her spine. She turned around and saw the shadow of a tall, thin figure standing behind her. The figure seemed to be made of darkness itself, and its face was twisted into a cruel smile. Clara tried to scream, but no sound came out of her mouth. She wanted to run, but her legs felt heavy as if they were filled with lead. The dark figure approached her, and she could feel its evil presence enveloping her like a shroud. Just when she thought it was the end, a loud noise broke the silence. The dark figure turned its head toward the sound and disappeared into the shadows. Taking this chance, Clara ran as fast as she could back to the orphanage. As she stumbled through the overgrown ruins, she could hear the dark figure moving through the trees behind her, its footsteps silent but deadly. She could feel its presence growing closer, and she knew that she had to get away. Suddenly, she remembered the hidden room that she had found earlier. With renewed determination, she raced toward the building, collapsing on the floor in a heap. Panting heavily, she looked around the room, frantically searching for a way out. Then she noticed a small hole in the wall that had been covered by a shelf. With a surge of adrenaline, she crawled through the hole and found herself in a secret passageway. As she made her way through the tunnels, she could hear the dark figure approaching, its voice echoing through the darkness. "You can't hide forever," it hissed. "I will find you." But Clara kept running, knowing that she had to escape from the orphanage if she wanted to survive. Finally, she came to a small opening at the end of the tunnel and crawled through it. She found herself in a dark forest, the trees towering over her like silent giants. As she ran deeper into the woods, she could feel the presence of the dark figure watching her, waiting for her to make a mistake. But Clara didn't look back. She ran until her lungs burned and her legs ached, not stopping until she reached a road far from the orphanage. As the first rays of sunlight touched the horizon, Clara collapsed on the road, exhausted and afraid. She had escaped the clutches of the dark figure, but she knew that it would be waiting for her in the shadows, ready to strike when she least expected it. From that day forward, Clara dedicated her life to uncovering the secrets of the Order and finding a way to defeat the dark figure. She traveled the world, searching for clues and learning about the ancient evils that lurked in the darkness. And, although her journey was fraught with danger and despair, she never gave up hope. For she knew that the fate of the world depended on her success. So, what do you think? What could the dark figure be? Let us know in the comments section below. And make sure to subscribe so you don't miss out on any of our spine-chilling tales. Thanks for watching, and happy haunting. Hello, friends. Welcome to this house. In 1960, a woman named Clara moved into the old Victorian orphanage on the hill. She had heard it was haunted, but the cheap rent was worth the risk. Besides, she wasn't afraid of ghosts. The previous caretaker, Mrs. Abernathy, had hung around long enough to warn Clara about the place. "You can't go upstairs," Mrs. Abernathy had said, shaking her head and wringing her hands. "Not after dark, not ever. And whatever you do, don't look behind the portraits. Just don't." But of course, Clara had done that first thing she did when she stepped foot inside the orphanage. Her gaze had risen to the portraits lining the stairs. There were 12 of them, each showing the smiling face of a child. There were no names under their pictures or dates, just 12 blank stares of porcelain skin and vacant eyes watching her from the walls. Some held dolls, others animals. One boy even had a book. They looked sweet, innocent, haunting, their painted eyes boring into hers. She felt drawn to them, these children without names or histories. Who were they? What had brought them here? And what had become of them? And then why did they stare at her so intensely? Were they real? Did they know something she didn't? Or worse, did they want something from her? Mrs. Abernathy had been gone a week. Clara was unpacking boxes when she heard shuffling sounds from above. She froze. Hadn't locked the door. Was someone up there? Then more sounds, footsteps, voices, whispers. Deliberately ignoring them, she returned to her boxes. When the commotion stopped, she resumed unpacking, pretending nothing happened. But later, when she went to bed, the sound of small feet pattering up the stairs woke her. Clara sat up in bed. Was she imagining things? Hadn't heard anything when she'd come here last week? Then a voice, soft and small, drifted through the darkness. "Who's there?" Clara called out. No reply. The voice came again. "Who's there?" Clara got out of bed. She walked toward the stairs. She could hear the patter of tiny feet and soft whispering. Her hand trembled as she reached for the banister. Should she climb the stairs? What if she found something terrible? She paused. Curiosity overwhelmed caution. Slowly, she began ascending the steps. Each step creaked ominously. She strained to listen to the whispers to make out their words, but couldn't quite. She neared the top of the stairs, her heart pounding in her chest. Reaching the landing, she hesitated, then turned toward the portraits, peering into the darkness. She saw eyes gleaming back at her, reflecting the faint moonlight filtering through the grimy windows. Startled, she stumbled backward, knocking over a wastebasket. It tumbled down the stairs, crashing into the one portrait that hadn't had eyes. It lay on the floor, shattered, the canvas ripped and torn. Gasping, Clara rushed to the picture. On the wall, she could see the outlines of two eyes scratched into the canvas. Now the portrait was complete. She stared at it in horror. The girl in the painting was identical to her. Shaken and frightened, Clara fled to her room and locked the door. Sleep was impossible. She tossed and turned in the darkness, listening to every creak and whisper. When the sun finally rose, she slipped out of bed and crept to the stairs. Carefully, she climbed the stairs, avoiding the portrait. Each step groaned under her weight. At the top, she noticed something strange. Two sets of footprints were imprinted in the dust on the steps. They looked like small children's shoes, worn and scuffed. She continued on, stepping carefully into the room at the end of the hall. Sunlight streamed through grimy windows, illuminating motes dancing in the air. In the corner, she spotted a rocking horse. It rocked gently as if pushed by an unseen hand. Hesitantly, she approached it. As she drew closer, the rocking grew faster and more violent. Panic rising, she stumbled back, tripping over a rug. The rocking horse continued rocking, faster and faster until it flew through the air, hooves flashing, and crashed into her, knocking her unconscious. She awoke to find herself lying on the cold stone floor. Groaning, she pushed herself up. The rocking horse stood over her, its wooden eyes staring. She scrambled away, pressing her back against the wall. The rocking horse took another step toward her, then stopped. Its head jerked sharply as if pulled by an invisible string. Fear lent speed to her movements as she raced out of the room and down the stairs. She didn't dare stop to breathe until she reached her room. She locked the door, leaning against it, panting heavily. She could hear the pounding of the rocking horse's hooves on the stairs. When the noise faded, she slid to the floor, burying her head in her arms. Maybe she'd imagined it all. The voices, the footsteps, the horse. But the rocking still echoed in her ears, and the memory of the cold stone floor beneath her cheek sent shivers down her spine. That night, she dreamed she stood in the dining hall of the orphanage. Pale children with hollow eyes sat at long tables, picking listlessly at their food. They turned their heads slowly, revealing empty sockets where eyes should be. "Clara, Clara, Clara," they chanted in unison, their voices hollow and mournful. She tried to call out, to scream for help, but her voice wouldn't come. She struggled to free herself from their grasp, but their icy fingers tightened around her, pulling her toward them. She awoke with a gasp, drenched in sweat. Dawn had broken, painting the sky with hues of purple and orange. The dream clung to her like cobwebs, leaving her weak and drained. Clara spent that day in bed, pulling the blankets over her head to block out the world. Every creak of the old house amplified her fear. What was happening to her? But then, curiosity piqued, she got up and went to the stairs. The portrait of the girl with scratched-out eyes stared back at her. But something was different. Where once there had been 11 other children, now there were 12. The final portrait, the one that had been blank when she'd arrived, now displayed Clara's own face. Her mouth was agape in a silent scream, her eyes wide with terror. Below the picture, scrawled in faded ink, were the words, "The last one." As realization dawned on her, she stumbled back, knocking over a chair. It toppled down the stairs, crashing to the bottom. Suddenly, the voices started. Soft at first, they grew louder with each passing moment. "Clara, Clara, Clara." They echoed through the house, bouncing off the walls. Each word chipped away at her sanity, driving her deeper into the abyss of despair. The rocking horse whinnied loudly, its wooden hooves pounding the stairs. Clara ran, seeking refuge in her room. She slammed the door shut, trying to muffle the sounds, but they only grew louder. She could hear the horse breathing heavily, its musky odor filling her nostrils. Then the scratching began. She pressed her ear against the door. The scratching grew frantic, as if something desperate clawed to get in. Clara screamed, burying her head in her arms. The scratching continued unabated. She could feel the vibrations through the floor, through her very bones. Then silence. A heavy silence that pressed down on her, suffocating her with dread. Slowly, she raised her head. The door stood ajar. She could see the rocking horse standing in the doorway. Its wooden eyes gleamed menacingly. One last wheeze escaped its dry lips before it lunged forward. That's all for today, friends. See you next time. Clara, a young, curious girl with a passion for mysteries, was visiting her godparents at their countryside home. It had been the old caretaker's home before him. But when he passed away, the house was left abandoned, and rumors began spreading that the house was haunted. Some said they heard footsteps in the attic, others claimed to see the shadow of an emaciated old man dragging himself down the stairs. While staying there, Clara couldn't help but feel uneasy, as if someone was watching her from the shadows. As the days went by, these unsettling feelings only grew stronger, pushing Clara to uncover the truth behind the caretaker's strange behavior and the secrets he was hiding. After exploring the dusty rooms and unearthing old photographs, Clara stumbled upon a hidden passage in the wall, leading her to a room filled with even more secrets. With each step, she felt the presence growing stronger, both terrifying and intriguing. What will Clara discover about the old caretaker? And how is he connected to the children who once lived in the house? Let's find out in today's episode. Now, with the floorboards creaking beneath her feet, Clara ventured into the attic. The air grew colder as she moved further, the silence broken only by the beating of her own heart. Suddenly, she noticed a peculiar sound, like the faint whisper of voices echoing from the depths of the house. Curiosity piqued, she followed the sound, which led her to an unassuming wall panel. As she pushed it open, a musty smell wafted out, making her nose wrinkle. Behind it lay a cellar, its entrance concealed for years. As she descended the rickety wooden steps, the whispers seemed to grow louder, morphing into what sounded like desperate pleas. At the bottom, she found herself in a dark, dank chamber illuminated only by a single, flickering bulb hanging from the ceiling. Her eyes struggled to pierce the gloom, but as they adjusted, she began to make out the walls were adorned with strange symbols painted in what looked like dried blood. A chill ran down her spine. The place reeked of decay and an overwhelming sense of dread. And in the center of it all, she saw something that made her gasp. In a circle were old children's toys, a rocking horse, a tattered teddy bear, and a porcelain doll with a cracked face. All these years later, they sat silently as if waiting for their turn to play. Clara felt a sudden urge to flee, to escape the suffocating atmosphere that threatened to consume her. But her curiosity was a persistent thing, and she knew she wouldn't find peace until she uncovered the meaning of those cryptic symbols and the story behind the toys. She took a deep breath, trying to steady her nerves. First, she needed light. Finding an old oil lamp on a nearby shelf, she filled it with oil and struck a match, the flame casting long dancing shadows that played across the cellar walls. The closer she looked at the symbols, the more she realized they resembled archaic runes. She had studied ancient languages in college, and she was pretty sure these symbols held some kind of meaning. Carefully, she traced one of the symbols, feeling a strange tingling sensation in her fingertips. Suddenly, a draft swept through the cellar, extinguishing the flame and plunging her into darkness. Panic surged through her as she groped for the oil lamp, desperately trying to relight it. Finally, she succeeded, bringing a semblance of light back into the room. But her ordeal had shaken her, reminding her of the fragility of reason in the face of the unknown. Just then, she noticed a loose brick in the wall, revealing a hollow space. Behind it was an old key. Could this be the key to unlocking the secrets of this cellar? And if so, what other mysteries lay hidden in the old caretaker's house? With newfound determination, Clara continued her search. Her eyes fell upon a heavy wooden chest tucked away in a corner. Hope surged through her. This could be the answer to everything. The cellar door creaked open, letting in a sliver of light that glinted off something in the corner. She hurried over, her heart pounding in her chest. It was a diary, its leather cover worn smooth with age. As she flipped through the brittle pages, she found entries detailing the caretaker's strange activities. He wrote of sacrificing the children under the blood moon to gain eternal life. He believed the blood moon, a rare celestial event, held immense power, and according to his twisted logic, he could cheat death by using the children's life essence during this lunar event. His diary revealed a horrifying truth. The children in the photographs were not merely residents of the orphanage. They were victims, sacrificed one by one to appease the entity he worshipped. Clara shuddered as she read his chilling musings, realizing the full extent of the evil that had lurked within those seemingly innocent walls. And as she turned the final page, a small key fell out. Could this be the key to the chest? With trembling hands, she made her way back to the cellar. The sight of the chest, now illuminated by the soft glow of her flashlight, seemed to mock her. Quickly, she inserted the key, her fingers fumbling slightly. The lock clicked open and the lid creaked upwards, revealing a cavity lined with velvet. Inside nestled a silver locket. Clara carefully lifted it out, her fingers brushing against the intricate engravings. On the locket, she felt a sudden surge of energy, the same tingling sensation she'd experienced in the cellar. Was this locket somehow connected to the strange occurrences in the house? And what would she find if she dared to open it? Hesitantly, she opened the locket, revealing a miniature portrait of a young girl with hauntingly familiar eyes. The girl in the portrait wore a dress similar to the one Clara had seen in the photograph. On the back, a name was inscribed, Amelia. Clara's heart skipped a beat. Could this be Amelia, one of the missing children? As she examined the locket, her fingers brushed against a small inscription. It read, "For my beloved Amelia, may you find peace." The words struck a chord, tugging at Clara's heartstrings. It was signed, "From your godmother." Suddenly, a wave of realization washed over Clara. The godparents she was visiting were the caretaker's former godparents, and Amelia, the girl in the portrait, was her god-sister. Overcome with emotion, Clara realized the caretaker had taken his own god-sister and other children to perform his dark rituals. A sob escaped her lips as the gravity of the situation sunk in. The diary entries, the symbols, the locket, it all made sense now. Driven by a need to understand, Clara delved deeper into the caretaker's past. She discovered that he had been a respected member of the community until his obsession with the occult consumed him. But why did he choose his own god-sister and other innocent children for his rituals? What had driven him to such extreme measures? As she pieced together the fragments of his life, Clara realized that the caretaker's descent into madness had been gradual, a slow burn fueled by an insatiable desire for power. His obsession with the blood moon, a rare celestial phenomenon, had grown into a dangerous fixation. He believed that by harnessing the energy of the blood moon, he could cheat death and achieve immortality. But his plans were thwarted when the townspeople, suspicious of his activities, intervened. In a desperate attempt to escape their scrutiny, he fled to the remote countryside, taking his godsister and other children with him. There, in the solitude of his new home, he carried out his twisted rituals, sacrificing the children in a macabre attempt to gain eternal life. Overwhelmed by the weight of this grim history, Clara felt a deep sense of sorrow for the innocent lives lost to the caretaker's madness. His diary revealed a chilling truth. The caretaker had attempted the ritual multiple times, each attempt fueled by his unwavering obsession. But each time the blood moon loomed, he failed, driven mad by his inability to achieve immortality. The final entry told of a horrifying discovery. The caretaker had learned that the souls of the children he had sacrificed were trapped within the house, feeding off his own life force. Driven by desperation, he decided to sacrifice himself, believing that by doing so he would finally join the children in death and perhaps find a twisted form of peace. As the last page turned, the chilling implications sunk in. The caretaker might be gone, but the souls of the children remained, forever tethered to the house, and as the full moon cast its eerie glow, Clara understood the full extent of the horror that had unfolded within those very walls. Under the Blood Moon was not just a tale of murder, but of obsession, despair, and the lengths one man had gone to cheat fate itself. With the mystery solved, Clara was left grappling with the haunting echoes of the past. The caretaker's final sacrifice had not brought him peace, but had instead trapped his soul alongside the children. Bound by tragedy, they became guardians of the house, forever reliving their final moments under the crimson moon. The house stood silent, a testament to the darkness that had once consumed it. Now, with the truth revealed, Clara wondered what fate awaited them. Would their souls find peace, or were they destined to wander the halls of the old house for eternity? The air hung heavy with the scent of honeysuckle and fear. Clara huddled deeper into the shadows, her heart pounding a frantic tattoo against her ribs. Tonight was the night of the next blood moon. She'd only been at the Pine Deep Orphanage for 2 weeks, yet she already knew the rules. You didn't speak of the blood moon. You didn't ask questions. And, most importantly, you didn't make a sound after dark. For tonight was the night when the veil between the worlds grew thin and the spirits of the dead wandered free. When the first sliver of the blood moon sliced through the horizon, casting an eerie red glow across the lawn, the caretaker appeared in the doorway. His face, obscured by the shadows, was a mask of stern disapproval. "It's time," he said, his voice a low growl that echoed with an unnatural resonance. As the other children filed past him, their eyes wide with terror, Clara noticed something odd. The caretaker seemed to be growing, his silhouette stretching and warping until it filled the doorway like a suffocating black cloud. But there was no time to question it. Soon it was her turn. Taking a deep breath to steady her trembling limbs, Clara walked past the grotesque apparition of the caretaker and out into the night. The air was thick with anticipation, charged with an energy that made the hairs on her arms stand on end. She joined the others in the center of the courtyard, their faces pale and drawn in the moonlight. They stood in a circle, their shoulders touching, forming a shaky barrier against the encroaching darkness. Then the caretaker stepped into the circle, his eyes gleaming with an otherworldly light. He raised his hands, and as he did, the ground beneath their feet began to tremble. A low, guttural chant started, rising and falling like a wave crashing against the shore. It was a song without words, a melody that spoke of sorrow and despair. As the chant reached its crescendo, the shadows around them writhed and twisted, taking on shapes both familiar and grotesque. Then, as suddenly as it had begun, it stopped. The shadows retreated, leaving the children alone in the harsh glare of the blood moon. One by one they began to change. Their skin took on a sickly pallor. Their eyes glowed an unnatural red, and their mouths stretched into ghastly smiles, revealing teeth that were sharp and cruel. With a horrifying lurch, they were no longer children, but creatures that mocked their former selves. They shambled forward, their limbs twisted at unnatural angles, their laughter echoing with a chilling emptiness. Then they turned, their eyes fixed on Clara, and began to crawl, inching closer, their cold, clammy touch sending shivers down her spine. She stumbled back, her mind screaming in terror, her heart threatening to burst from her chest. She could feel their eyes boring into her, their presence seeping into her bones. And then she understood. This was the ritual. These were the offerings. And she, Clara, was to be the final one. Her blood would nourish the spirits, sealing them back into the earth until the next blood moon when the cycle would begin anew. She looked back at the house, its windows like vacant eyes staring back at her. She could hear the whispers now, slithering through the cracks in the walls, beckoning her closer. Panic seized her. She turned to run, but it was too late. The creatures were upon her, their laughter echoing in her ears, their icy fingers digging into her flesh. She screamed, a primal sound of fear and anguish, but her cries were swallowed by the night. The creatures closed in, their faces contorted in a silent snarl, their eyes burning with an unholy fire. Then, just as suddenly as it began, it stopped. The creatures froze, their heads turning toward the house in unison. Clara, her body trembling, turned to look, and that's when she saw it. The front door of the orphanage had swung open and a figure stood silhouetted against the light. The figure stepped out into the courtyard, and as the blood moon climbed higher in the sky, Clara gasped, for it was the caretaker, and he was not alone. Behind him, the other children stood, their faces pale and drawn, their eyes wide with terror. And behind them came more figures, each bearing the same terrified expression. They were all wearing the same clothes Clara had worn when she first arrived at the orphanage. The new arrivals stared at the creatures in the courtyard, their mouths open in silent screams. Then, slowly, they began to move. They shambled forward, their limbs twisted at unnatural angles, their laughter echoing with a chilling emptiness. Just as the first creature lunged for her, Clara felt a hand on her shoulder. She whirled around, her eyes wide with terror, and screamed, but it was only the caretaker. His face was ashen, his eyes filled with a desperate urgency. "Run," he whispered, his voice hoarse and strained. "Run to the house." Without a word, he pushed her toward the front door. She hesitated for a moment, torn between fear and curiosity, then turned and fled. The creatures in the courtyard let out a chorus of shrieks and lunged for her, but she was too quick for them. She stumbled through the house, the sound of their pursuit echoing behind her. She could hear the front door burst open and the caretakers shout, "Get away!" But she didn't need to be told twice. She ran up the stairs, her lungs burning, her legs heavy with exhaustion. She could feel their presence behind her, growing stronger with every step. She reached the second floor and turned to the left, racing down the hallway. At the end, she found a door and threw herself inside. It was a nursery, filled with cribs and toys and rocking horses. In the corner, a rocking chair moved gently back and forth as if someone had just gotten up from it. She didn't have time to question it. She ran to the window and climbed onto the sill. The fresh air hit her lungs and she took a deep breath, trying to calm the pounding of her heart. Below her, the ground was a dizzying drop, but she had no choice. She jumped. She fell for what seemed like an eternity, the wind whipping through her hair, the ground rushing up to meet her. Then she landed, rolling over and over until she finally came to a stop. She lay there for a moment, her body aching, her breath coming in ragged gasps. Then she pushed herself up onto her knees and turned to look back at the house. The window was dark now, the room empty. As the first rays of dawn touched the horizon, she stumbled to her feet and brushed herself off. She looked back at the house, its windows like vacant eyes staring back at her. She could hear the whispers now, slithering through the cracks in the walls, beckoning her closer. Shaking off the memory of the previous night, Clara decided to start a new life. She never returned to the house, but the memories of the orphanage followed her like a shadow, always there, never leaving her side. And every full moon, she can still hear the sound of children whispering lullabies in the dead of the night, their voices echoing in the darkness, a chilling reminder of the fate that awaits those who enter the Pine Deep Orphanage.